Imagine a brilliant surgeon faced with an impossible moral dilemma. There are 5 patients in need of organ transplants, each requiring a different organ to survive. A healthy individual with no knowledge of the situation visits the hospital for a routine checkup. The surgeon has the ability to save the 5 patients by sacrificing the healthy individual and using their organs. What should the surgeon do? This scenario illustrates the complexities of utilitarianism, a philosophy that seeks to maximize overall happiness, even in the face of deeply uncomfortable moral decisions. This philosophy is a form of consequentialism, meaning the morality of an action depends on its results rather than the action itself or the intentions behind it. First developed by Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century and later refined by John Stuart Mill, utilitarianism provides a framework for making ethical decisions by focusing on outcomes that benefit the majority. The foundation of utilitarianism is the principle of utility, which states that the best action is the one that maximizes happiness and minimizes suffering. Jeremy Bentham, the founder of utilitarianism, envisioned this principle as a guide for individual actions and public policies. Bentham also introduced the idea of a hedonic calculus to weigh the benefits and harms of different choices, though later utilitarians moved beyond strict calculations. John Stuart Mill refined utilitarianism by emphasizing not just the quantity, but the quality of happiness. He argued that intellectual and moral pleasures, such as personal growth and helping others, are more valuable than physical pleasures. Mill also incorporated justice into utilitarianism, highlighting the need to balance individual rights with the collective good. For Mill, a truly utilitarian society is one where fairness and happiness coexist. Despite its influence, utilitarianism has been criticized for several reasons. The tyranny of the majority. Critics argue that utilitarianism can justify actions that harm minorities if they benefit the majority. For example, policies that disproportionately affect marginalized groups might still be seen as moral under utilitarian logic. Difficulty in measuring happiness. Determining the impact of actions on overall well-being is complex. Happiness and suffering are subjective experiences, making it challenging to apply utilitarian principles consistently. Ignoring individual rights. Utilitarianism focuses on outcomes, sometimes at the expense of individual rights or moral rules. For instance, sacrificing one person to save many others might maximize happiness, but violates fundamental ethical principles. Demanding nature. Utilitarianism often requires individuals to prioritize collective well-being over personal interests, which can be overwhelming. For example, it might suggest that people donate most of their income to alleviate global poverty, leaving little room for personal fulfillment. Utilitarianism challenges us to think beyond ourselves and consider the impact of our actions on the broader world. It asks us to balance individual desires with collective well-being and to make decisions based on outcomes rather than intentions. While it's not without flaws, utilitarianism remains a powerful framework for navigating complex moral questions. So, when faced with a difficult decision, how will you weigh the happiness of the many against the needs of the few? Hedonism is a philosophical view that places pleasure and happiness as the ultimate goals of life. The word hedonism comes from the Greek word hedone, meaning pleasure. At its core, hedonism asserts that the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain are the most important principles guiding human actions. There are many forms of hedonism, but they all share the idea that pleasure, whether physical, emotional, or intellectual, is intrinsically good. One well-known type of hedonism is ethical hedonism, which argues that it's morally right to seek pleasure for oneself and others. Another form, psychological hedonism, suggests that people naturally act to maximize their own pleasure, whether they are aware of it or not. Hedonism does not necessarily mean indulging in every desire or living without restraint. Many hedonists, such as the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus, emphasized the importance of moderation. They believed that true happiness comes from enjoying simple pleasures and avoiding excess, which often leads to pain. Hedonism recognizes different kinds of pleasure. Physical pleasures such as eating good food or enjoying a relaxing bath are immediate and sensory. However, many hedonists argue that intellectual and emotional pleasures, like learning something new, forming meaningful relationships, or experiencing art can be deeper and more fulfilling. Epicurus, a key figure in hedonistic philosophy, distinguished between two kinds of pleasure: kinetic pleasure, which comes from satisfying desires, like eating when you're hungry, and static pleasure, which is the contentment you feel when those desires are fully satisfied. He believed that a simple life, free of unnecessary desires, leads to greater happiness. The idea of measuring pleasure and pain is central to hedonism. Philosophers like Jeremy Bentham, who promoted utilitarian hedonism, introduced the hedonic calculus. This is a method for evaluating actions based on how much pleasure or pain they produce. The calculus considers factors like intensity, duration, certainty, and proximity of the pleasure or pain. For example, if you're deciding whether to eat a second slice of cake, the hedonic calculus might weigh the immediate pleasure of enjoying the dessert against the potential long-term discomfort or health consequences. Ethical hedonism and altruism. Ethical hedonism isn't just about personal pleasure, it also considers the happiness of others. Many hedonists believe that creating a world where everyone experiences more pleasure and less pain is the most ethical way to live. This idea is closely tied to utilitarianism, which seeks to maximize overall happiness. Hedonism has practical applications in many aspects of life. It encourages people to focus on activities that bring joy and minimize unnecessary suffering. For instance, prioritizing time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, and taking care of one's health align with hedonistic values. However, hedonism also raises ethical questions. For example, what happens when pursuing personal pleasure conflicts with the well-being of others? Hedonists argue that true pleasure cannot come from harming others, as guilt and social consequences often outweigh any immediate satisfaction. Hedonism also intersects with broader social issues. Policies aimed at improving quality of life, reducing poverty, and addressing mental health challenges align with the hedonistic goal of minimizing pain and increasing happiness. At the same time, debates around consumerism and environmental impact highlight the need for balance. Unchecked indulgence can lead to resource depletion and harm to future generations, which is counter to the principles of sustainable pleasure. Hedonism has faced criticism for being overly simplistic and self-centered. Critics argue that life's meaning cannot be reduced to the pursuit of pleasure. For instance, some believe that values like duty, sacrifice, or personal growth are just as important as happiness, even if they involve discomfort or pain. Others point out that pleasure is subjective and difficult to measure. What brings joy to one person may not have the same effect on another, making it hard to create universal rules based on hedonism. Additionally, the focus on pleasure can sometimes lead to short-sighted decisions that overlook long-term consequences. Despite these critiques, hedonism offers a valuable perspective by reminding us of the importance of happiness and well-being. It encourages individuals to reflect on what truly brings them joy and how they can minimize unnecessary suffering in their lives and the lives of others. Imagine life as a storm. Sometimes it's calm, and other times it's raging with unexpected challenges. In these moments, how do you maintain your balance? How do you keep moving forward? At its heart, Stoicism is a philosophy designed for action and endurance. It focuses on how we can live virtuously and navigate life's challenges with resilience and grace. The Stoics believed that we are part of a greater cosmic order, where everything happens according to reason and natural laws. This order, often referred to as the Logos, connects all things. By understanding and aligning ourselves with this order, we can find harmony within ourselves and with the world. The Stoics emphasized 4 cardinal virtues as the foundation of a good life: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Wisdom involves seeing the world clearly, understanding what is within our control and what is not. Courage is the strength to face life's difficulties with resolve. Justice is about treating others fairly and acting in ways that contribute to the common good. Temperance or moderation ensures that we maintain balance and avoid excess in all aspects of life. One of the core principles of Stoicism is the distinction between what we can and cannot control. Epictetus famously wrote, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." This idea is central to Stoic practice. The Stoics teach us to focus our energy on our own thoughts, choices, and actions, which are within our control, while accepting external events and outcomes, which are not. By doing so, we free ourselves from unnecessary worry and frustration. One of the most profound exercises in Stoicism is negative visualization, known as premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This practice encourages us to mentally prepare for potential hardships or losses. For example, consider what it would feel like to lose a valued possession, face a setback at work, or encounter a moment of personal difficulty. By imagining these scenarios, not to dwell on them, but to prepare for them, we build resilience and gratitude. This practice helps us appreciate what we have now, while reducing the shock of adversity should it arise. As you lie here, take a moment to reflect on one aspect of your life you deeply value. Picture what life might be like without it, not to spark fear, but to foster a deeper sense of gratitude. Now, return to the present and hold on to that appreciation. The Stoics placed immense importance on the dichotomy of control. This principle invites us to clearly distinguish between what is within our power and what lies beyond it. Things within our control include our thoughts, attitudes, and actions. External events, the opinions of others, and the outcomes of our efforts are beyond our control. This principle liberates us from the burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. Imagine a situation where you're waiting for the results of something important, like a test or a job interview. Instead of worrying about the outcome, focus on the effort you've already put in. Trust that you've done what you can and let the rest unfold as it will. This mindset reduces anxiety and fosters inner peace. To the Stoics, virtue was the highest good. They believed that a life lived in accordance with virtue is a life well lived. But what does practicing virtue look like in our daily lives? It might mean acting with kindness even when faced with hostility, showing courage in the face of uncertainty, or exercising patience when things don't go as planned. One practical way to cultivate virtue is through self-reflection. At the end of each day, take a moment to review your actions. Ask yourself, did I act with wisdom? Was I fair in my interactions? Did I maintain self-control? This habit not only strengthens your character, but also deepens your awareness of how to live in harmony with Stoic principles. A central idea in Stoicism is amor fati, or the love of fate. The Stoics encourage us to embrace all that happens, not merely to accept it passively, but to actively love it. This means viewing challenges, setbacks, and even suffering as opportunities for growth and learning. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it." This powerful metaphor reminds us to transform every experience into fuel for our inner fire. As you lie here, think of a challenge you faced recently. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle, try to view it as a teacher. What lesson did it offer you? With this mindset, even life's difficulties can become sources of strength. Though Stoicism predates modern mindfulness practices, it shares a deep focus on living in the present moment. The Stoics believed that much of our suffering comes from ruminating on the past or worrying about the future. By grounding ourselves in the present, we free our minds from unnecessary distress. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, let your thoughts settle on this moment. Feel the weight of your body on the bed, the gentle rhythm of your breath. Notice the sensations around you without judgment. This simple practice aligns beautifully with the Stoic goal of maintaining clarity and peace in the here and now. Epicureanism, an ancient Greek philosophy founded by Epicurus in the 4th century BCE. Unlike the grandeur of Stoicism, Epicureanism takes a more modest yet equally profound approach to life. Epicurus believed that the key to happiness lies in simplicity, friendship, and freedom from fear. His teachings inspire us to embrace life's simple pleasures and find joy in moderation. At its essence, Epicureanism is a philosophy about achieving happiness through the pursuit of pleasure, not indulgent or hedonistic pleasure, but rather the kind that brings lasting tranquility. Epicurus distinguished between two types of pleasures, kinetic and static. Kinetic pleasures arise from satisfying immediate desires, like eating when we're hungry. Static pleasures, on the other hand, come from a state of contentment and absence of pain or want. Epicurus believed that the highest form of pleasure is ataraxia, a state of serene calmness, free from worry and disturbance. He also emphasized aponia, the absence of physical pain, as essential to happiness. Together, these concepts form the foundation of a peaceful and fulfilling life. Epicureanism also addresses our fears, particularly the fear of death. Epicurus famously argued that death is nothing to us, because when we are alive, death is not present, and when death comes, we are no longer there to experience it. By understanding this, we can free ourselves from the fear of mortality and focus on enjoying the present moment. Epicurus believed that the greatest pleasures in life are often the simplest. In a world that constantly pushes us toward more possessions, more accomplishments, more experiences, we often forget that true joy doesn't lie in excess, but in the quiet moments that bring us peace. A warm meal shared with friends, the comfort of a cozy home, the laughter of loved ones, or the beauty of a sunset, these simple experiences, when fully appreciated, bring lasting contentment. Epicurus taught that chasing extravagant or excessive pleasures, such as indulgence in luxury, fame, or fleeting pleasures, can often lead to dissatisfaction. This happens because such desires are often insatiable. Once one is satisfied, the desire for more immediately arises, creating a cycle of constant craving. Instead of finding lasting happiness in the pursuit of the unattainable, we should cultivate contentment in what is within our reach. This philosophy reminds us that life's greatest treasures are often not hidden in the distant future, but right before us, within easy reach. Simple moments, when savored, can be far more fulfilling than chasing after what we don't yet have. These moments of serenity and calm, found in daily pleasures, are the true source of happiness. For Epicurus, friendship was one of the most essential sources of happiness. In a world that often prizes individual success and material wealth, Epicurus reminded us that the deepest joys come from genuine human connections. He believed that friends provide us with support, joy, and shared understanding. To have a friend, Epicurus argued, is to have someone who sees you for who you truly are and stands by you in good times and bad. Epicurus went so far as to say, of all the things which wisdom provides to make life entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship. Friendship is not only a source of happiness, but also a safeguard against the fears and struggles that we all encounter. The bonds we share with others ground us, offering us both solace and strength when we face life's inevitable challenges. Friendship, in Epicurean terms, isn't just about having someone to laugh with, it's about mutual support, honesty, and shared experiences that enrich our lives. It is a reminder that happiness, in its purest form, is never found in isolation, but in connection with others. Epicurus was particularly concerned with the fears that plague us throughout life. Fear of the gods, fear of judgment, and the fear of death are significant barriers to peace and contentment. Epicurus believed that the gods, if they exist, are indifferent to human affairs, and that there is no reason to fear their wrath or judgment. By understanding that the gods have no involvement in our lives, we can free ourselves from the anxieties tied to seeking their approval. As for death, Epicurus argued that it is not something to dread. Death is merely the cessation of sensation. When we are alive, death is not present, and when death comes, we will no longer exist to experience it. Understanding this simple truth can free us from the fear of mortality and allow us to live fully in the present. There is no need to fear that which is inevitable, nor should we waste our precious time on concerns that are beyond our control. By confronting these fears, we can live a life free from the anxieties that often cloud our thoughts. Epicurus encouraged us to rationalize these fears and accept their natural place in life, allowing us to focus on the moments that bring us peace and joy. Freeing ourselves from fear is not just an intellectual exercise, but a vital step toward living a more fulfilling and tranquil life. Epicureanism teaches that moderation is the key to a balanced and fulfilling life. Excessive indulgence, whether in food, wealth, or ambition, often leads to dissatisfaction, imbalance, and even physical and emotional strain. When we overindulge, we experience the law of diminishing returns. The more we have, the less we enjoy it, and the more we crave. Epicurus argued that the secret to happiness lies not in the extremes, but in moderation. Living a life of moderation doesn't mean denying ourselves the pleasures of life, but it does mean that we should enjoy them without excess or obsession. By embracing simplicity and moderation, we find contentment in the everyday things that bring us joy. Moderation leads to greater peace, a sense of balance, and an appreciation for life as it is, without the constant need for more. Epicurus encouraged us to examine areas of our lives where excess may cause stress, anxiety, or dissatisfaction. Whether it's work, personal goals, or even relationships, moderation helps us cultivate peace and tranquility. By making intentional choices that prioritize balance, we align ourselves with a life of greater contentment. Epicurus taught that the present moment is all we truly have. The past is gone, and the future is uncertain. Worrying about what has already happened or what may come only robs us of the peace and joy that the present moment can offer. The practice of mindfulness, rooted in Epicurean thought, is a way to fully engage with the here and now, experiencing life in its simplest form. To live mindfully is to let go of the distractions that pull us away from the present and embrace the beauty of the moment. The Stoics focused on controlling what we can control. The Epicureans remind us that the present is where our power lies. By being fully present in each moment, we are able to appreciate the little pleasures that make life so rich. Epicurus's emphasis on mindfulness encourages us to savor life's pleasures, small as they may be, and to acknowledge their fleeting nature. When we focus on the here and now, we discover that the world is filled with simple joys, waiting to be fully experienced. Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that your entire life is a blank slate. No obligations, no predetermined path, just the freedom to choose who you want to be and what you want to do. It sounds both liberating and terrifying, doesn't it? This is the core of existentialism, a philosophy that challenges us to confront the absurdity of life and our place in an uncertain world. Existentialism invites us to face the freedom that comes with our existence, embrace the responsibility of our choices, and find meaning in a world that may seem meaningless at first glance. Existentialism is a philosophical movement that emphasizes individual freedom, choice, and responsibility. It emerged in the 20th century with thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Søren Kierkegaard, and Friedrich Nietzsche, who questioned traditional views on life, morality, and existence. At its core, existentialism is concerned with the experience of being human. It focuses on the individual's journey through life, the burden of freedom, and the search for meaning in an often chaotic and indifferent world. Existentialists argue that we are not born with an inherent purpose. Rather, we must create our own meaning through our actions, choices, and experiences. One of the foundational ideas of existentialism is the notion of radical freedom. According to existentialists, we are free to make our own choices, and with that freedom comes immense responsibility. There is no higher power or divine being telling us what to do or how to live. We are the authors of our own lives. This freedom can be both empowering and overwhelming. Sartre famously said, "Man is condemned to be free." What he meant is that, unlike objects or animals that follow predetermined paths, humans must constantly make choices. We cannot escape the burden of this freedom. Every decision we make, from the small ones to the monumental ones, is ours alone to carry. But with freedom comes responsibility. We are responsible not only for our own actions, but also for how those actions affect others. Our choices are not made in a vacuum. They contribute to shaping the world around us. The existentialist challenge is to take full ownership of these choices and embrace the weight of our freedom. One of the most important themes in existentialism is the idea of the absurd. The absurd refers to the conflict between our deep desire for meaning and the apparent meaninglessness of the universe. We search for purpose, we long for answers, yet the world around us often seems indifferent to our efforts. The French philosopher Albert Camus argued that life is inherently absurd because, no matter how much we try to find meaning, the universe offers no clear answers. Yet, rather than succumb to despair, Camus suggested that we must embrace the absurdity of life. Instead of turning away from the meaningless, we can find freedom in accepting it. By acknowledging that life has no inherent meaning, we are free to create our own. The existentialist response to the absurd is not to retreat into nihilism, but to confront it head-on. We must recognize the limits of our understanding and create our own meaning through our actions, relationships, and experiences. This act of creating meaning in a meaningless world is, for existentialists, the essence of human freedom. Another key idea in existentialism is authenticity. To live authentically means to live in accordance with one's true self, rather than conforming to societal expectations or living according to the roles that others impose on us. Existentialists believe that many people live in bad faith, a state in which they deny their freedom and responsibility, choosing to follow the paths laid out for them rather than embracing their own individuality. To be authentic is to recognize and embrace our freedom, to make choices that reflect our true desires and values. It requires us to confront the uncomfortable reality that we are responsible for our own lives and for the meaning we create. The authentic individual does not shy away from this responsibility, but instead embraces it fully. Living authentically also means accepting the uncertainty and anxiety that comes with freedom. We are not guaranteed happiness or success, and the world does not provide us with a clear moral guide. But by accepting this uncertainty, we can live a life that is true to ourselves. Existentialism also teaches that angst, or existential anxiety, is an unavoidable part of being human. This feeling of unease arises when we are faced with the reality of our freedom, responsibility, and the lack of inherent meaning in life. It is the recognition that, as individuals, we are alone in the world, and that we must navigate life's challenges without any predetermined map. Rather than a feeling to be avoided, existentialists view angst as a crucial aspect of human experience. It is the emotional response to the realization of our freedom and the weight of responsibility. Sartre described it as the feeling that arises when we realize that we are the creators of our own existence. Though uncomfortable, this anxiety is a sign of our awareness and our capacity for self-creation. Rather than seeking to escape this anxiety, existentialists encourage us to embrace it. By confronting our existential angst, we are forced to make choices, to take responsibility, and to find meaning in our own terms. In this way, anxiety becomes a catalyst for living a more intentional and authentic life. Existentialism does not shy away from the harsh realities of life. It confronts the fundamental aspects of the human condition, such as death, isolation, and suffering. Rather than offering comforting answers or easy solutions, existentialism acknowledges the inherent struggles of being human. For existentialists, death is an inescapable reality, and it is only through facing our mortality that we can fully appreciate the preciousness of life. Rather than live in fear of death or avoid thinking about it, existentialism urges us to confront it. By acknowledging death's inevitability, we are reminded to live more fully, to make the most of our time, and to seek meaning in the present moment. This philosophy also grapples with the concept of isolation. We are ultimately alone in our consciousness, separate from others in the most fundamental sense. This isolation can lead to feelings of alienation, but it also offers us the freedom to define ourselves on our own terms. Through this recognition of our separation, we can come to terms with our individuality and the unique journey we must undertake. Existentialism invites us to face the raw realities of life, the uncertainty, the absurdity, the responsibility, and the freedom that comes with our existence. It challenges us to confront life on our own terms, to embrace our freedom, and to create meaning in a world that offers none. It calls us to live authentically, to recognize the weight of our choices, and to find purpose not in external validation, but in our own actions and relationships. In the face of life's absurdity and existential anxiety, existentialism does not offer easy comfort, but instead empowers us to live fully and meaningfully. The freedom to choose who we are and how we live is both a burden and a gift, one that allows us to create a life that is uniquely our own. What if everything you see around you, the objects, the people, the experiences, are merely shadows of a deeper, more perfect reality? A world where the true nature of things is not what we see or touch, but something far more abstract, existing beyond the physical realm. This is the essence of Platonism, a philosophy founded by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. Platonism explores the existence of a higher, ideal world, one of eternal forms or ideas, that serves as the true reality, while the world we perceive through our senses is merely a flawed reflection of that truth. At the heart of Platonism is the theory of forms, Plato believed that the material world, the one we can see and touch, is not the ultimate reality. Instead, he argued that everything in our world is a mere imitation or shadow of an ideal form, which exists in a non-material, eternal realm. For Plato, a perfect chair, for example, doesn't exist in the physical world, but rather in the realm of forms. Every chair we see is just a poor reflection of the ideal form of chairness. This applies to everything: beauty, love, justice, and even numbers. These concepts, in their purest and most perfect state, exist in the world of forms, and our experiences in the material world are simply imperfect copies. The world of forms is a realm of perfect truth, where all things are immutable and eternal. It is only through the mind, through reason and intellectual understanding, that we can come to know these forms. The senses, which perceive the material world, can never lead us to the truth. Instead, Plato argued that true knowledge comes from contemplating the eternal, unchanging forms beyond our sensory experiences. One of Plato's most powerful illustrations of his philosophy is the allegory of the cave. In this allegory, Plato imagines a group of people chained inside a dark cave. They are facing the wall, unable to see anything except shadows cast by objects behind them, which are illuminated by a fire. These shadows are the only reality the prisoners know. They believe the shadows to be the only true things because it's all they've ever seen. Now, imagine one prisoner is freed and leaves the cave. Initially, he's blinded by the sunlight outside, but gradually his eyes adjust, and he sees the world as it truly is: vibrant, real, and filled with perfect forms. The prisoner comes to understand that the shadows in the cave were mere illusions, distortions of the true reality outside. Plato used this allegory to explain how the physical world is like the shadows in the cave, only an imperfect copy of the true ideal world of forms. Just as the freed prisoner comes to understand the truth outside the cave, we must escape the limitations of our senses and use reason to grasp the higher eternal truths of the forms. In Plato's view, knowledge is not something we acquire through sensory experience or empirical observation. Instead, knowledge is recollection. Plato argued that before we were born, our souls existed in the realm of forms and had access to all knowledge. Upon birth, we forget this knowledge, but we can recall it through rational thought and philosophical inquiry. This process of recollection is what Plato refers to as anamnesis. The physical world for Plato is like a blurry reflection of the higher world of forms. Our senses may mislead us, but through careful reasoning and philosophical contemplation, we can come to recognize the truths we once knew. This idea contrasts sharply with modern science, which values empirical observation and sensory data as the primary means of gaining knowledge. For Plato, however, true knowledge lies in the realm of abstract ideas, and it is through intellect and understanding, rather than sensory experience, that we come to understand the world as it truly is. One of Plato's most influential ideas extends beyond metaphysics and into politics. In his work, The Republic, Plato presents his vision of the ideal society, governed by philosopher kings. These philosopher kings are the rulers who possess the knowledge of the forms and understand the ultimate truths of existence. Because they know what is truly good, they are best equipped to lead a society that is just, harmonious, and in alignment with the higher moral order. Plato believed that only those who grasp the true, unchanging nature of things, those who are trained in philosophy and reason, are fit to rule. In the ideal state, the pursuit of truth, justice, and virtue would guide all decisions. The society would be structured in a way that each person performs the role for which they are best suited, and the rulers would govern not for personal gain, but for the good of the entire community. This idea of a philosopher king, ruling by wisdom and understanding, contrasts with other forms of government, where rulers may be motivated by power, wealth, or self-interest. Plato argued that a just society must be governed by those who seek the truth, not those who are blinded by the illusions of the material world. Plato also explored the relationship between the soul and the body. For Plato, the soul is immortal and transcendent, existing in the realm of forms before birth, and continuing to exist after death. The body, on the other hand, is temporary and part of the physical world, subject to decay and corruption. Plato believed that the soul's true nature is connected to the world of forms, and that the body serves as a distraction from the soul's true purpose. The physical world, with its temptations and distractions, keeps the soul from accessing the higher truths. Through philosophical practice and the pursuit of wisdom, however, the soul can begin to detach from the physical world and focus on the eternal, unchanging forms. This dualism, the separation of body and soul, shapes much of Plato's thinking. While the body is a source of limitation and imperfection, the soul is seen as a spark of the divine, striving to reunite with the ideal, perfect world of forms. Platonism asks us to consider the possibility that the world we see is just a reflection, a pale imitation of a more perfect, unchanging reality. It challenges us to look beyond the physical, to seek truth through reason and contemplation, and to aspire to a higher understanding of existence. In a world full of distractions and uncertainties, Plato's philosophy encourages us to search for the eternal forms, to pursue wisdom, and to live in alignment with the higher truths that transcend the material world. Whether in our personal quest for knowledge or in our broader societal structures, the influence of Plato's ideas continues to shape our understanding of the world and our place within it. What if the universe, in its deepest essence, is a single, indivisible unity, one unchanging, eternal reality from which everything flows? This is the central idea of Neoplatonism, a philosophy that takes the ideas of Plato and expands them into a mystical vision of existence. Neoplatonism provides a way to understand the world as a series of emanations from a singular divine source, what they call the One. Neoplatonism was developed by the philosopher Plotinus in the 3rd century CE and has since influenced not only philosophy, but also theology, mysticism, and the arts. At the core of Neoplatonism is the idea of the One. This is the ultimate source of all that exists. It is the singular, eternal, and ineffable reality, beyond all attributes and concepts. In the Neoplatonic worldview, the One is beyond being, beyond thought, beyond description. It is so pure and absolute that it cannot be directly known or defined. From the One flows all of reality. The material world, the realm of the soul, and the intelligible world of thought are all emanations of the One. Rather than being a creator in the traditional sense, the One is the source from which everything emanates in a process of continuous unfolding. It is not an entity that creates in time. It is the wellspring from which all things come into being. The key idea in Neoplatonism is that the One is completely unified, indivisible, and perfect. Everything that emanates from it, although distinct, is still tied to this fundamental unity, sharing in the One's perfection and unity, yet never fully encapsulating it. From the One, all things emanate. Emanation is central to Neoplatonic thought. It's important to understand that emanation, in this context, is not creation or causality in a traditional sense. Instead, it's a continuous and spontaneous unfolding of reality from the One, much like light flowing from the sun. Each successive emanation represents a further degree of differentiation, but it is still, in essence, linked back to the source. The first emanation from the One is nous, often translated as the divine intellect or the world of pure thought. Nous contains all the perfect forms, the ideal structures of all that exists, much like Plato's theory of forms. However, unlike Plato, Neoplatonists view nous not as abstract concepts, but as a living, active intelligence that is deeply connected to the One. The second emanation is the soul, which bridges the gap between the intellectual and material worlds. The soul represents both individual souls and the universal soul that connects all things. Through the soul, everything in the physical world is connected to the higher divine reality. Finally, the last level of emanation is the material world, the realm of physical objects and sensory experience. Although the material world appears to be separate, Neoplatonism teaches that it too is an extension of the One and is inherently connected to the divine order, though it's often the furthest from the source. The human soul, according to Neoplatonism, is divine in origin. It originates from the soul, the second emanation of the One. The soul's purpose is to ascend back toward its origin, the One, through a process of purification and intellectual ascent. The soul's journey begins in the material world, where it becomes entangled with the physical body and the distractions of sensory experience. However, the Neoplatonic view is that the soul retains an innate connection to the higher realms of reality. This connection can be rediscovered through philosophy, meditation, and contemplation. By turning inward and contemplating the divine, the soul can rise through the levels of reality, moving from the material to the intellectual and eventually returning to the unity of the One. This return to the One is seen as the soul's ultimate purpose, a reunion with its source where it experiences unity and perfection once again. Neoplatonism is not merely a theoretical philosophy, it also emphasizes direct, personal experience of the divine. For the Neoplatonists, the goal of life is not only intellectual ascent, but also mystical union with the One. Plotinus and other Neoplatonists believed that through deep contemplation and ascetic practices, one could transcend the limitations of the material world and experience a profound sense of unity with the divine. This experience of union with the One is beyond ordinary perception. It's an inner experience of being dissolved into the infinite and eternal reality. Neoplatonic mysticism is a journey of shedding the false identities and distractions of the material world, moving beyond the sense of individual self and achieving unity with the greater cosmic order. It is through this union that one finds true happiness, peace, and enlightenment. For Neoplatonists, the concept of the good is the central principle that governs all of existence. The good is often identified with the One itself. It is the ultimate source of all truth, beauty, and virtue, and everything emanates from it in a natural progression toward greater goodness. The good is not a moral command or external law. Rather, it is the very nature of reality itself. Everything that exists strives toward the good, and, in doing so, finds its fulfillment. The closer something is to the One, the more it partakes in the good and becomes aligned with the divine purpose. In this sense, Neoplatonism offers a vision of a cosmos that is inherently ordered and good, even if it appears fragmented or chaotic at times. The material world, while distant from the One, is still good because it emanates from the divine and reflects it in some imperfect form. Neoplatonism has had a profound influence on the development of philosophy, especially in the realms of metaphysics, theology, and mysticism. Early Christian thinkers like Augustine of Hippo were heavily influenced by Neoplatonic ideas, particularly in their views on God, the soul, and the nature of the universe. Neoplatonic thought also found its way into Islamic and Jewish mysticism, shaping the development of Sufism and Kabbalah. Even in the Renaissance, thinkers such as Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola drew upon Neoplatonic ideas to develop their own spiritual philosophies. Today, Neoplatonism's influence continues in modern spiritual movements, metaphysical systems, and even psychology, where the idea of unity and interconnectedness remains a core principle. Neoplatonism presents a vision of the universe as a harmonious, interconnected whole, where all things emanate from a single ineffable source, the One. Through contemplation, purification, and intellectual ascent, the soul is invited to return to its source, achieving unity and perfection. It offers a view of reality that transcends the material and the individual, reminding us that everything is connected to a greater divine order. Whether through philosophy, mysticism, or personal reflection, Neoplatonism encourages us to seek the deeper unity of all things and the divine truth that lies beyond appearances. In a world often divided by superficial differences, Neoplatonism invites us to look beyond the material and experience the profound interconnectedness of existence. It calls us to recognize the divine within ourselves and the universe, guiding us toward a greater understanding of the good, the One, and the eternal return. What does it mean to live a good life? How do we achieve true happiness, not just in fleeting moments, but in a lasting, meaningful way? For Aristotle, the answer lies in the cultivation of virtue and the pursuit of the good life. Aristotle's Ethics is a deeply practical philosophy, offering a roadmap for becoming the best version of ourselves and living in accordance with our highest potential. At the heart of Aristotle's ethical philosophy is the idea of eudaimonia, often translated as happiness or flourishing. However, for Aristotle, eudaimonia is much more than a fleeting feeling of pleasure. It is the highest good, the ultimate purpose or end that we strive for in life. Aristotle argued that every action we take is aimed at some goal, and all of our goals ultimately aim toward achieving eudaimonia. It is the fulfillment of our human potential, the expression of our deepest capacities, and living in accordance with reason. In Aristotle's view, happiness is not a result of external goods or material wealth. While these things can contribute to a good life, true happiness is found through living a life of virtue, in alignment with our nature as rational beings. It is about cultivating a character that embodies moral excellence. For Aristotle, virtue is central to achieving eudaimonia. But what exactly is virtue? Virtue, in Aristotle's Ethics, is a trait of character that lies between deficiency and excess. Virtue is about finding the balance between two extremes, something he calls the golden mean. For example, courage is a virtue, but it lies between the extremes of recklessness and cowardice. A courageous person doesn't act out of rashness or fear, but finds the right balance in facing danger. Similarly, generosity is the virtue between prodigality, excessive giving, and stinginess, insufficient giving. Aristotle believed that virtues are not innate, they must be cultivated through practice and habit. Just as a muscle becomes stronger through exercise, our character becomes virtuous through repeated actions. The more we act virtuously, the more virtuous we become. The cultivation of virtue, for Aristotle, is a lifelong process. It requires consistent effort, reflection, and self-discipline. But in doing so, we align ourselves with our rational nature, which leads us closer to the fulfillment of our highest potential, our eudaimonia. Aristotle's doctrine of the mean is a crucial component of his ethical philosophy. He argued that moral virtues exist between extremes, and it is this balance that leads to a good life. Virtue, for Aristotle, is about finding the middle ground between excess and deficiency. Take, for instance, the virtue of temperance, which deals with our desires and appetites. The excess of temperance is indulgence, where one seeks pleasure without restraint. The deficiency is insensitivity, where one avoids pleasure altogether. The virtue lies in moderation, enjoying life's pleasures but not letting them control us. Similarly, Aristotle discusses other virtues, such as honesty, where the excess might be boastfulness and the deficiency could be self-deprecation. The virtue, honesty, is somewhere in between, speaking truthfully and confidently, but without exaggeration or false modesty. The doctrine of the mean teaches us that moral excellence isn't about achieving an ideal state of perfection. It's about balancing our tendencies, desires, and actions. It's about finding the right proportion in every aspect of life. Reason plays a pivotal role in Aristotelian ethics. For Aristotle, human beings are rational creatures, and it is through our reason that we are able to understand the world, make ethical decisions, and achieve eudaimonia. In fact, Aristotle believed that the essence of virtue lies in the exercise of reason. To be virtuous is to make rational decisions in accordance with the good, understanding the right course of action and choosing it deliberately. This is what Aristotle meant when he said that virtue is about doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, for the right reasons. Our reason guides us in finding the balance between extremes, helping us make decisions that lead to human flourishing. It enables us to determine how to live well, not just for our own benefit, but for the good of the community around us. In this sense, the cultivation of virtue isn't just about individual happiness, but about living harmoniously with others, contributing to the common good, and making decisions that reflect our rational nature and moral responsibility. In Aristotelian ethics, practical wisdom, or phronesis, is the ability to make sound, ethical decisions in everyday life. It's the virtue that allows us to apply our reason to specific situations, determining the best course of action in complex or uncertain circumstances. While intellectual wisdom is concerned with abstract knowledge and universal truths, practical wisdom is concerned with how to act in the real world. It's the ability to navigate life's challenges with discernment, understanding, and a deep sense of moral responsibility. Aristotle believed that practical wisdom is what allows us to live virtuously. It's not enough to know what is right. we must also have the ability to act on that knowledge in the right way at the right time. Practical wisdom helps us achieve this in our day-to-day lives. Aristotle's view of ethics is deeply relational. While individual virtues are essential for flourishing, Aristotle believed that friendships and community are just as important. In fact, Aristotle argued that humans are naturally social beings, and we cannot achieve eudaimonia alone. For Aristotle, there are three types of friendship: those based on utility, those based on pleasure, and those based on virtue. Of these, the highest and most enduring form of friendship is the virtuous friendship, one where both individuals help each other grow in virtue, support each other's flourishing, and act in the best interests of one another. Aristotle believed that a flourishing society depends on virtuous individuals who work together for the common good. Our relationships, whether with friends, family, or the broader community, are essential to living a fulfilled life. In fact, Aristotle argued that a life without friends is a life less than fully lived. While Aristotle's ethics emphasizes action, he also recognizes the value of contemplation. For Aristotle, the highest form of human life is not just one of action in the world, but one of intellectual reflection and contemplation of the good. In his work, Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle writes that the life of contemplation, the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, is the most divine and fulfilling life. It is through contemplation that we align ourselves with our rational nature and achieve a deeper understanding of the world and the principles that govern it. However, Aristotle doesn't see contemplation as a life apart from action. The contemplative life, in his view, is the culmination of living virtuously. Through contemplation, we come to understand our place in the world and the deeper truths of existence, bringing us closer to the fulfillment of eudaimonia. Aristotelian Ethics offers a vision of the good life that emphasizes virtue, rationality, and the cultivation of moral excellence. It teaches us that true happiness is found not in fleeting pleasures or material wealth, but in the development of our character, the practice of virtue, and the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. By striving for balance, acting in accordance with reason, and contributing to the common good, we can achieve eudaimonia, the flourishing of our full potential as human beings. Aristotle's ethics remind us that the good life is not something that happens to us, but something we must actively create through our choices, actions, and relationships. What do we really know? Can we trust our senses, our reasoning, or even the very facts we take for granted? Skepticism, an ancient and influential philosophical tradition, challenges us to question what we think we know and urges us to suspend judgment in the face of uncertainty. Skepticism is the philosophical position that knowledge is either uncertain or unattainable. Skeptics argue that it's difficult, if not impossible, to be certain about anything. Whether it's the external world, other people's thoughts, or even our own minds, skepticism suggests that we must always question the reliability of our perceptions and beliefs. Skepticism isn't about rejecting knowledge altogether, but about recognizing the limitations of human understanding. Skeptics propose that doubt and inquiry are central to the pursuit of truth, and they believe that certainty should be approached with caution. The roots of skepticism stretch back to ancient Greece, particularly through the works of Pyrrho of Elis, whose ideas laid the groundwork for later schools of skeptical thought. Pyrrho and his followers maintain that because we cannot be absolutely certain about anything, the best course of action is to suspend judgment, adopt a stance of open-mindedness, and seek tranquility by acknowledging our limitations. Skepticism first emerged in Western philosophy with Pyrrho of Elis, a philosopher in ancient Greece who traveled with Alexander the Great and became convinced that nothing can be known for certain. He proposed that all things are equally uncertain and that we should refrain from making judgments about them. For Pyrrho, living in accordance with skepticism led to ataraxia, a state of inner peace and tranquility that comes from recognizing that we cannot know everything. By suspending judgment, we avoid the anxiety that comes from our attempts to find absolute answers. The skeptics who followed Pyrrho, such as Sextus Empiricus, refined his ideas, arguing that since our senses can deceive us and our reasoning can be flawed, we should refrain from asserting any beliefs about the world that we cannot be absolutely certain about. Skepticism takes many forms, each with its own way of addressing human knowledge and certainty. Let's take a closer look at some of the key branches of skeptical thought. Pyrrhonian skepticism is the original form of skepticism, which advocates for suspending judgment about all things. Pyrrho believed that in order to achieve peace of mind, we must acknowledge that nothing is absolutely certain. By withholding judgment, we can avoid distress and embrace uncertainty. Academic skepticism, developed by Plato's followers at the Academy, focused more specifically on the idea that knowledge is impossible. Unlike Pyrrhonian skeptics, academic skeptics argued that while we might not be able to know anything for certain, we can at least strive for probable knowledge, knowledge that is more likely to be true than false. Empirical skepticism focuses on the limits of sensory experience. Our senses, they argue, are often unreliable and prone to error, meaning that we cannot fully trust what we see, hear, or feel. This skepticism challenges the assumptions of those who believe that sensory perception provides a clear window into reality. Philosophical skepticism is a broader category that addresses skepticism in the context of philosophy and metaphysics. Philosophical skeptics ask fundamental questions about reality, existence, and knowledge. Can we ever truly know the world as it is? Or do we only know it through our own mental filters and subjective perceptions? Skepticism is fundamentally about doubt, but unlike cynicism or nihilism, skepticism does not seek to deny the possibility of knowledge or truth. Rather, it seeks to expose the limits of human certainty. By doubting everything, skeptics invite us to reconsider our beliefs and consider alternative possibilities. Doubt is not the enemy of knowledge, it is the starting point. For skeptics, it's only through questioning and critical thinking that we can arrive at a deeper understanding of the world. Rather than taking things for granted, skepticism asks us to examine the evidence, challenge assumptions, and consider other perspectives before coming to any conclusions. In this way, skepticism aligns with scientific inquiry. Science itself is built on the premise of doubt and questioning. Scientists question hypotheses, test their ideas, and remain open to revising their conclusions as new evidence arises. In a similar way, skeptics believe that we should remain humble and open-minded in the face of the unknown. One of the most famous skeptical challenges is the brain in a vat thought experiment, which questions whether we can ever know whether our perceptions of the world are real or simply simulations generated by an external force. The challenge here is that our sensory experiences might not correspond to reality. How can we be sure that the world we experience is not an illusion? What if, like Descartes' famous idea of the evil demon manipulating our perceptions, all of our experiences are deceiving us? These questions don't necessarily prove that we know nothing, but they force us to confront the uncertainty inherent in our knowledge. Skeptics argue that certainty about anything, including the existence of an external world, is difficult, if not impossible, to attain. While skepticism can seem unsettling or even frustrating at times, it offers a number of practical benefits. The primary advantage of skepticism is that it encourages intellectual humility. By recognizing the limits of our knowledge, we can approach the world with curiosity, openness, and a willingness to learn. Skepticism also fosters critical thinking. In a world full of misinformation, cognitive biases, and persuasive rhetoric, skepticism encourages us to carefully evaluate the evidence before accepting claims. It teaches us to question assumptions, challenge authority, and seek truth in an open-minded way. Moreover, skepticism promotes intellectual freedom. When we suspend judgment about the ultimate truth of things, we free ourselves from rigid belief systems and dogmas. This intellectual freedom allows us to explore new ideas, entertain different perspectives, and remain adaptable in the face of uncertainty. Skepticism continues to play a vital role in contemporary life. In an age of information overload, skepticism encourages us to question everything, from the news we read to the products we buy to the promises we are sold by advertisers. With the rise of social media and fake news, the ability to think critically and remain skeptical is more important than ever. In science, skepticism drives progress. Scientists continually question theories, test assumptions, and refine their understanding of the world. In philosophy, skepticism challenges us to probe the very foundations of knowledge, ethics, and existence. In everyday life, adopting a skeptical mindset can help us avoid making hasty decisions or falling prey to manipulation. It encourages us to remain open to new ideas, to challenge our biases, and to continually seek truth, even when it's elusive. Skepticism invites us to embrace doubt as a tool for deeper understanding and growth. Rather than accepting things at face value, skeptics encourage us to question our beliefs, examine our assumptions, and explore alternative explanations. It's not about rejecting truth, but about recognizing the complexity of knowledge and the limitations of our certainty. By engaging with skepticism, we learn to approach the world with intellectual humility, open-mindedness, and critical inquiry. Skepticism reminds us that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing process, and that the search for truth is as much about asking the right questions as it is about finding the right answers. What happens when reason and faith come together in the search for truth? How do we reconcile the teachings of religion with the logic of philosophy? Scholasticism, a philosophical and theological system that flourished in medieval Europe, provides an answer by merging the wisdom of ancient philosophy with the teachings of Christianity. It sought to harmonize faith with reason and to explore deep questions about God, existence, and the nature of knowledge. Scholasticism is a medieval philosophy and theology that emerged in the 12th century and reached its peak in the 13th and 14th centuries. It was an intellectual movement aimed at reconciling faith and reason, using philosophical reasoning to understand and interpret religious truths. The scholars who practiced scholasticism, called scholastics, sought to apply the methods of dialectical reasoning, debating and analyzing opposing ideas, to resolve apparent contradictions between faith and reason, the natural world and divine revelation. At the heart of scholasticism is the belief that human reason is a valuable tool for understanding divine truths. However, scholastics also maintain that certain truths, such as the existence of God and the teachings of Scripture, transcend human reason and must be accepted on faith. The goal was to systematize and organize knowledge, finding logical coherence between philosophy and theology. Perhaps the most influential scholastic philosopher and theologian, Thomas Aquinas synthesized the works of Aristotle with Christian doctrine. His magnum opus, the Summa Theologica, systematically addresses questions about God, the soul, morality, and human nature. Aquinas argued that reason and faith were not contradictory, but complementary. He believed that many truths about the universe could be discovered through human reason, but others, such as the mysteries of God's nature, were beyond human understanding and must be accepted through faith. One of the central concerns of scholasticism was the relationship between faith and reason. How can human reason, which deals with the natural world, be reconciled with divine revelation, which is rooted in faith? Scholastics believed that there was no real conflict between the two. Instead, they argued that faith and reason are complementary ways of approaching truth. Faith, according to scholastic thinkers, provides us with knowledge of divine truths that cannot be reached by reason alone, such as the existence of God and the mysteries of the Trinity. On the other hand, reason helps us understand and explain the natural world and can be used to defend and explain religious truths in a logical and systematic way. Thomas Aquinas, for example, famously argued that while reason can lead us to an understanding of God's existence through the observation of the natural world, the deeper mysteries of God, such as the Trinity and the Incarnation, must be accepted through faith alone. For him, faith does not contradict reason. Instead, reason can help illuminate and support the truths revealed by faith. The scholastic method was characterized by a systematic and dialectical approach to learning. Dialectic, a method of reasoning that involves the exchange of opposing arguments and ideas, was central to scholasticism. Scholastics used dialectical reasoning to examine and analyze theological and philosophical questions, often exploring both sides of an argument before reaching a conclusion. The method typically began with posing a question, followed by presenting objections, counter-arguments, and a detailed discussion of possible answers. The goal was to clarify concepts and arrive at a well-reasoned, logical solution to complex questions. This process of inquiry helped refine theological and philosophical ideas and led to the development of highly detailed and comprehensive works, such as Aquinas' Summa Theologica. Scholasticism emphasized the importance of engaging with previous thinkers, particularly the works of Aristotle, Augustine, and the early Church Fathers. In this way, scholastics built upon the intellectual traditions of the past, while seeking to harmonize and integrate new ideas with established doctrines. Scholastics engaged with a wide range of philosophical and theological questions, often seeking to explain the nature of God, the soul, morality, and human existence. These are some of the key topics. 1. The existence of God. Scholastics, particularly Thomas Aquinas, developed philosophical arguments for the existence of God, most notably the 5 ways, 5 logical arguments based on observation of the natural world that aim to demonstrate the existence of a first cause or necessary being. 2. The problem of universals. Scholastics also debated the nature of universals, the abstract concepts that apply to multiple things, such as goodness or humanity. Are universals real, existing independently of particular things, or are they simply names we give to common features of things? This debate between realism and nominalism played a significant role in scholastic philosophy. 3. Free will and divine predestination. Another central issue was the compatibility of free will and God's omniscience. How can humans have free will if God already knows the outcome of all events? Scholastics, especially figures like Augustine and Aquinas, sought to reconcile human freedom with divine providence and predestination. 4. Ethics and the nature of virtue. Scholastics worked to understand the nature of moral virtues and how they relate to divine law. Aquinas, for instance, argued that moral virtue is the habit of choosing the good, which is known through reason and revealed through divine law. The goal of ethics for the scholastics was to lead individuals to live in accordance with both natural law and divine revelation. Scholasticism represents a remarkable attempt to integrate faith, reason, and logic into a unified system of thought. By engaging with the works of ancient philosophers and integrating them with Christian doctrine, scholastics sought to make sense of the mysteries of existence, morality, and the divine. Through careful reasoning, dialectical inquiry, and the exploration of profound theological questions, scholastic thinkers helped shape the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages. Their efforts to reconcile reason with faith have had a lasting impact on philosophy, theology, and the study of knowledge itself. Scholasticism invites us to consider the relationship between belief and understanding, encouraging us to explore the mysteries of life with both reason and faith. Humanism is a worldview and philosophical outlook that places humans, their needs, and their potential at the center of understanding the world. It is based on the belief that human beings have the capacity for reason, creativity, and moral decision-making, and that these faculties should be the foundation of how we live and govern society. Unlike religious or supernatural belief systems that place divine or transcendent entities at the center of existence, humanism focuses on human experiences, individual freedoms, and the importance of human well-being. Humanists believe that human beings are capable of solving problems, improving their condition, and creating a just and flourishing society through the use of reason, ethics, and scientific inquiry. Humanism emerged during the Renaissance, a period of cultural and intellectual revival in Europe. It was inspired by the classical ideas of ancient Greece and Rome, where thinkers emphasized human reason, individual potential, and the pursuit of knowledge. The Renaissance humanists like Petrarch, Erasmus, and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola looked to classical texts to revitalize education and to focus on human potential. They believed in the importance of studying subjects such as history, literature, and the arts, seeing them as essential to understanding the human condition. While humanism has roots in the Renaissance, its principles have been foundational to many modern movements. The development of scientific inquiry, the human rights movement, and the establishment of secular, human-centered ethics have all been influenced by humanist thought. Humanism is built around several core principles that shape its worldview. 1. The value of human beings. Humanism places great value on human dignity and the potential for individual and collective growth. Every human life has intrinsic worth, and this should be respected and upheld in both ethical and political contexts. 2. Reason and critical thinking. Humanists emphasize the importance of reason and rational thought. They believe that through critical thinking, we can make better decisions, solve problems, and improve our understanding of the world. Humanism encourages the use of evidence, logic, and scientific methods to reach conclusions and form ethical judgments. 3. Ethics based on human welfare. Humanism advocates for ethical principles that prioritize human well-being. Rather than relying on religious or supernatural dictates, humanists focus on creating systems that promote the flourishing of individuals and communities. These principles often align with ideas like fairness, justice, empathy, and compassion, grounded in human experiences and reasoned arguments. 4. The pursuit of knowledge and education. Humanism encourages a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, understanding, and self-improvement. It emphasizes the importance of education and the acquisition of knowledge not just for personal development, but for the betterment of society. By valuing critical inquiry, intellectual curiosity, and learning, humanism strives to expand human potential. 5. Secularism and freedom of thought. Humanists typically advocate for a secular approach to life and governance, meaning that public institutions and laws should not be based on religious doctrines. They support the right of individuals to follow their own beliefs, as long as those beliefs do not infringe on the rights of others. 6. Social justice and human rights. Humanism emphasizes the importance of justice and equality for all people. Humanists work toward a society where individuals have the freedom to live fulfilling lives, free from oppression or discrimination, and where fundamental rights, like freedom of expression, access to education, and equality before the law, are upheld for all. At the heart of humanism is the idea of human flourishing. Humanists believe that the purpose of life is to live well. This includes physical well-being, intellectual development, emotional fulfillment, and the pursuit of moral virtue. Human flourishing is not defined by religious salvation, but by the development of one's capabilities and contributing to society in meaningful ways. It's about living a life rich in meaning, purpose, and connection, where individuals are empowered to reach their full potential through education, creativity, and ethical action. For humanists, the good life is one where we pursue happiness, contribute to the common good, and help others achieve their potential. This view encourages self-actualization and a sense of responsibility to others, ensuring that all people have the opportunity to thrive. Humanism has a deep connection with the scientific method and empirical inquiry. Humanists believe that through observation, experimentation, and reason, we can come to understand the world around us and improve the human condition. The rise of scientific inquiry during the Enlightenment was heavily influenced by humanist ideas. Thinkers like Galileo, Newton, and Darwin were influenced by humanism's focus on reason, evidence, and human potential. Modern humanists continue to support scientific research as a way to solve problems, improve life, and advance knowledge. Humanism views the natural world as the primary source of knowledge. Rather than looking to the supernatural for explanations, it promotes critical thinking, skepticism of unproven claims, and the use of rational inquiry to solve complex problems, from medicine to climate change to space exploration. Humanism continues to have a profound impact on contemporary thought. It's the foundation of many modern movements advocating for human rights, social justice, and democracy. Humanist values have shaped key documents such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which promotes freedom, dignity, and equality for all people. In education, humanism supports a curriculum that encourages critical thinking, creativity, and a deep understanding of the world's diverse cultures. In the arts, humanists encourage exploration of the human condition, emphasizing human experience and self-expression. Philosophically, humanism stands at the forefront of discussions about secular ethics, arguing that humans can live meaningful, moral lives without relying on religion or supernatural beliefs. It continues to advocate for freedom of thought, social progress, and the empowerment of individuals to shape their own destiny. As we look to the future, humanism remains a vital force for positive change. In a world facing challenges like climate change, inequality, and technological advancement, humanism encourages us to address these issues with reason, compassion, and a commitment to human well-being. By prioritizing human flourishing, ethical responsibility, and social justice, humanism offers a vision for a future where we build a society based on respect for individual dignity, rational thought, and the common good. In this sense, humanism is not just a philosophy, it's a call to action. It urges us to live thoughtfully, to question assumptions, to seek knowledge, and to work together to create a better, more just world. Humanism challenges us to see humanity as the center of meaning and action. It teaches us to embrace our shared humanity, our capacity for reason, and our moral responsibility to each other. Rather than relying on external forces or divine intervention, humanism calls on us to create meaning in our own lives and in the world, working toward a more just, compassionate, and flourishing existence for all. Whether you're seeking personal growth, social justice, or a deeper understanding of the world, humanism provides a framework for living with purpose, reason, and empathy. What if the mind and the body are not the same thing? What if our thoughts, experiences, and consciousness exist independently from our physical bodies? This is the core idea behind Cartesian Dualism, a revolutionary philosophy introduced by the 17th century French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes' groundbreaking theory divides existence into two distinct substances, mind and body, which continue to shape our understanding of consciousness, personal identity, and the nature of reality itself. In today's exploration, we'll dive into Cartesian dualism, examining its implications, its challenges, and its lasting impact on philosophy. Cartesian dualism, named after René Descartes, is the philosophical idea that reality consists of two fundamental substances, res cogitans, the thinking substance or mind, and res extensa, the extended substance or body. Descartes proposed that the mind or consciousness is distinct from the body and that the two interact with each other in some way, but are separate in nature. Descartes argued that the mind and body are intimately connected but fundamentally different in essence. The body is made of physical matter, while the mind is a non-physical, thinking substance that cannot be broken down or divided. One of Descartes' most famous ideas comes from his Meditations on First Philosophy, where he introduces the proposition cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. This simple statement captures Descartes' assertion of the mind's existence as distinct from the body. In his philosophical quest to find certainty, Descartes began by doubting everything, his body, the physical world, and even his own thoughts. He realized that even if everything he perceived was a deception, the very act of doubting or thinking meant that he, the thinker, must exist. This led him to conclude that the mind, his capacity for thought and self-awareness, was certain even if the physical world was not. Through this idea, Descartes set the foundation for dualism. The mind, as a thinking, self-aware substance, cannot be doubted, while the body, as part of the physical world, is subject to doubt and uncertainty. One of the most important and challenging aspects of Cartesian dualism is the question of how the mind and body interact. Descartes suggested that the mind and body are connected and that they influence each other. However, he struggled to fully explain how this interaction occurs, which became one of the key criticisms of his theory. Descartes believed that the pineal gland, a small structure in the brain, might be the point where the mind and body interact. He proposed that the pineal gland acts as a kind of bridge, allowing the immaterial mind to influence the physical body and vice versa. Despite this idea, Descartes did not provide a clear explanation of how a non-material substance, the mind, could influence a material substance, the body. The question of how the mind and body interact remains one of the most difficult problems in philosophy, often referred to as the mind-body problem. How can something non-physical, like thoughts or consciousness, affect physical processes such as movement or sensation? This problem has prompted ongoing debate and exploration in philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. The mind-body problem is one of the central concerns in Cartesian dualism. It arises from the difficulty of explaining how a non-material mind can interact with the material body. Descartes' suggestion of the pineal gland as the point of interaction didn't provide a satisfactory explanation, and philosophers have continued to wrestle with this issue ever since. Several schools of thought have emerged to address the mind-body problem, including 1. Materialism. Materialists reject dualism altogether, arguing that the mind is not separate from the body, but is a product of physical processes in the brain. According to this view, consciousness and mental states are simply the result of brain activity, and the mind is fully reducible to physical matter. 2. Idealism. In contrast, idealists argue that the mind is the fundamental reality, and the material world is either dependent on or a manifestation of the mind. From this perspective, reality is constructed by the mind, and the body exists only as a mental projection. 3. Property dualism. Some philosophers propose a middle ground known as property dualism, where mental states are seen as distinct from physical states, but are still dependent on the brain's physical processes. Mental properties such as consciousness and emotions arise from the physical brain but are not reducible to it. The mind-body problem remains a core issue in modern philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience, with no definitive answers yet available. The debates Descartes sparked over 400 years ago continue to shape contemporary discussions about the nature of consciousness and reality. Although Cartesian dualism has faced significant criticism over the centuries, it has had a profound impact on Western philosophy and thought. Descartes' division of mind and body laid the groundwork for much of modern philosophy, especially in the areas of consciousness, epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and the philosophy of mind. Descartes' emphasis on doubt and skepticism also shaped the development of modern science and empirical inquiry. His rigorous approach to questioning everything, including the physical world and his own existence, led to the idea that knowledge must be certain and grounded in reason. This laid the foundation for the scientific revolution and the development of the scientific method. Moreover, Descartes' exploration of the mind influenced the development of psychology, neurology, and cognitive science, fields that continue to investigate the relationship between mind and body, consciousness and self-awareness. While Cartesian dualism has been highly influential, it has also faced significant criticism, particularly regarding the mind-body interaction problem. Some of the main criticisms include 1. The problem of interaction. As mentioned earlier, Descartes' suggestion that the pineal gland mediates the interaction between mind and body remains problematic. Critics argue that it is unclear how a non-material substance, like the mind, could influence something as tangible and physical as the brain or the body. 2. The rise of materialism. With the advancement of neuroscience and psychology, many scholars have moved away from dualism in favor of materialism, the view that mental states are entirely the product of physical processes in the brain. Materialism challenges the need for a separate, non-physical mind, and suggests that consciousness can be fully explained by brain activity. 3. The issue of consciousness. Despite the challenges to dualism, the question of consciousness remains central. How does subjective experience, or qualia, arise from physical matter? This question continues to elude both dualists and materialists, and it has driven many contemporary philosophers to seek new ways to explain the nature of consciousness. Cartesian dualism has left a lasting legacy on philosophy, science, and our understanding of the mind. By proposing that the mind and body are separate yet interconnected, Descartes opened the door to important debates about consciousness, self-awareness, and the nature of reality. While Cartesian dualism has faced criticism and has been challenged by modern scientific theories, its questions remain central to contemporary philosophy. The mind-body problem continues to shape discussions in fields ranging from neuroscience to artificial intelligence, as we seek to understand the very nature of our consciousness and existence. As we reflect on Descartes' groundbreaking insights, we are reminded that the pursuit of knowledge is an ongoing journey, one that continues to challenge our understanding of the most fundamental aspects of reality. Empiricism is a philosophical theory that asserts that knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience. According to empiricists, the mind starts as a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and knowledge is built up over time through our interaction with the world. This contrasts with rationalism, which argues that knowledge comes from reason and innate ideas, independent of sensory experience. The core idea behind empiricism is that all knowledge is rooted in what we can observe, hear, touch, taste, and smell, essentially the evidence provided by the senses. From this, we form ideas, concepts, and understandings of the world. Empiricists argue that the only reliable source of knowledge is empirical evidence, gained through direct observation and experimentation. This philosophy underpins much of modern science, where observation, hypothesis testing, and evidence are the cornerstones of knowledge acquisition. Empiricism has been a foundational philosophy for many great thinkers, particularly in the development of modern science and epistemology. These are some of the key figures who have shaped empiricist thought. John Locke is often regarded as one of the founding fathers of empiricism. In his work An Essay Concerning Human Understanding, Locke argued that the mind is a blank slate at birth, and that all knowledge comes from experience. According to Locke, there are two types of experience that form our knowledge: sensation, what we perceive through our senses, and reflection, the mind's internal processing of sensory information. This idea of the mind as a blank slate challenged earlier theories that posited innate knowledge and shaped the way we think about human development. George Berkeley advanced empiricism further with his idea of idealism, which suggests that material objects only exist as perceptions in the mind. For Berkeley, to be is to be perceived. This means that everything we know is based on sensory perception, and without perception, objects do not exist in the way we think they do. His famous dictum, esse est percipi, to be is to be perceived, underscores the radical nature of his thought, challenging the notion of an external world independent of our experiences. David Hume is another influential empiricist who took the ideas of Locke and Berkeley further, particularly in his skepticism about causality and the nature of the self. In a treatise of human nature, Hume argued that all knowledge is rooted in impressions and ideas derived from sensory experience. However, Hume famously questioned the notion of causality, suggesting that our belief in cause and effect is not based on reason or evidence, but on habit and psychological conditioning. This radical skepticism about the certainty of knowledge has had a profound impact on modern philosophy. For empiricists, sensory experience is the foundation of all knowledge. Everything we know about the world starts with what we observe through our senses, whether it's seeing a tree, feeling a warm breeze, or tasting something sweet. The information we gather through these experiences is then processed by the mind to form ideas and concepts. This idea that experience shapes knowledge challenges older views that emphasized abstract reasoning or innate knowledge. For empiricists, it is only by interacting with the world that we can form an accurate understanding of it. Take, for example, a child learning about the concept of red. The child's understanding of redness comes from the sensory experience of seeing red objects in the world: apples, stop signs, flowers. Over time, the child forms the concept of red by associating that particular sensory experience with the word. Without this sensory input, the concept of red wouldn't exist in the child's mind. Empiricists argue that the process of learning is cumulative, built from successive sensory experiences that allow us to refine our understanding of the world. Empiricism has played a key role in the development of the scientific method, the systematic approach to acquiring knowledge that relies on observation, experimentation, and evidence. In fact, empiricism is the philosophical foundation for much of modern science. The scientific method involves forming hypotheses, conducting experiments, and observing the results to test whether the hypothesis is true. This process emphasizes empirical evidence, data gathered through observation or experimentation, over theoretical speculation or religious belief. In science, knowledge is considered provisional and subject to change based on new evidence. This is central to the empiricist philosophy, which maintains that our understanding of the world is always evolving as we gather more sensory data and refine our interpretations. For example, when scientists conduct experiments, they rely on their senses and tools that extend those senses, such as microscopes or telescopes, to collect data, test theories, and make discoveries. Through this empirical process, science has led to advancements in medicine, technology, and our understanding of the universe. One of the key challenges for empiricism is how we can be certain about the existence of an external world outside of our senses. If all knowledge is derived from sensory experience, how do we know that what we perceive reflects reality? John Locke's concept of primary qualities, such as size, shape, and motion, and secondary qualities, such as color, taste, and sound, addresses this issue. Locke argued that primary qualities exist independently of the observer, while secondary qualities are subjective experiences created by the mind's interaction with the world. David Hume further explored this skepticism by arguing that while we experience the world through our senses, our knowledge of causality, the self, and the external world is based on habit and custom, rather than certain knowledge. Hume's skepticism challenged the ability of empiricism to provide definitive knowledge about the world, especially when it comes to concepts like causality or the existence of objects beyond our immediate perception. Despite these challenges, empiricism has remained influential in shaping the modern scientific worldview, where observation and evidence are central to understanding the world around us. While empiricism has had a profound impact on philosophy and science, it has not been without criticism. One of the major criticisms is its reliance on sensory experience as the sole source of knowledge. Critics argue that not all knowledge can be derived from the senses. There are abstract concepts, like mathematics and ethics, that don't seem to be directly observable but still provide us with valuable knowledge. Rationalists such as René Descartes and Immanuel Kant argue that knowledge is not just the result of sensory experience, but is also grounded in reason and innate ideas. For them, reason allows us to understand abstract concepts and to deduce truths that cannot be observed directly. Hume raised another challenge to empiricism in his discussion of induction, the process of inferring general principles from specific observations. Hume argued that there is no rational justification for believing that the future will resemble the past, despite our habit of making such inferences based on past experience. This skeptical challenge questioned the reliability of knowledge derived from sensory experience alone. Empiricism has played a central role in shaping modern philosophy, science, and our understanding of knowledge. By emphasizing sensory experience as the foundation of all knowledge, empiricists have championed the idea that the world can be understood through observation, evidence, and reason. While empiricism has faced significant challenges, particularly in its ability to address abstract knowledge and its reliance on sensory perception, it remains a cornerstone of scientific inquiry and has greatly contributed to our understanding of the world. In the end, empiricism reminds us that knowledge is not something fixed and final, but something that evolves as we continue to observe, question, and test the world around us. Rationalism is the philosophical doctrine that knowledge is primarily derived from reason rather than sensory experience. According to rationalists, the mind possesses innate ideas or principles that can be uncovered through the exercise of reason alone. In contrast to empiricism, which argues that knowledge comes from sensory experience and observation, rationalism asserts that certain truths are known independently of experience. For rationalists, reason is the primary source of knowledge. Through logical deduction and intellectual insight, we can come to understand the fundamental nature of reality. Rationalists believe that human beings are born with an inherent ability to reason, and that through this capacity, we can gain certain universal knowledge about the world, the self, and the universe. Key to rationalism is the idea that some knowledge is a priori, that is, knowledge that is independent of experience and can be known through reasoning alone without needing to be verified by sensory input. Rationalism has been championed by some of the greatest philosophers in history. These are a few key figures who helped define and shape rationalist thought. Baruch Spinoza was a rationalist who believed that everything in the universe is part of one substance, which he identified as God or nature. In his work, Ethics, Spinoza argued that all knowledge comes from the use of reason, and that the human mind can understand the universe through logical systems. He posited that reality itself is governed by rational laws, and that human emotions and actions can be understood through reason. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz further developed rationalist philosophy by proposing that the universe is made up of monads, fundamental indivisible substances. Leibniz argued that humans possess an innate ability to reason and that the universe operates according to pre-established rational principles. He is also known for his optimism, famously stating that we live in the best of all possible worlds because the rationality of the universe ensures that it is perfectly ordered. These thinkers, among others, helped solidify rationalism as a dominant philosophical view, emphasizing the importance of reason as the key to knowledge and understanding. René Descartes is often considered the father of modern rationalism. In his work, Meditations on First Philosophy, Descartes famously said, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. Descartes argued that the act of doubting or thinking is proof of one's existence and that reason is the foundation of all knowledge. He believed that the mind is distinct from the body and that knowledge of the world is accessible through the use of reason. Descartes introduced the idea of methodical doubt, where everything that can be doubted is questioned, leaving only the certainty of the self and reason. One of the central ideas of rationalism is a priori knowledge, knowledge that is independent of sensory experience. Unlike empirical knowledge, which is derived from what we observe in the world, a priori knowledge is thought to be accessible through reason alone. These are truths that we know to be true, regardless of experience or observation. For example, mathematical truths such as 2 plus 2 equals 4, or logical principles like A is A, are considered a priori. These truths don't depend on seeing, hearing, or touching anything. They are known simply through the exercise of reason. Rationalists argue that certain principles, such as the laws of logic, morality, or mathematics, are universal and necessary, and that they can be known independently of sensory experience. For them, the mind is equipped with these innate ideas, and through the process of rational thought, we can access these universal truths. For rationalists, reason is the fundamental tool through which knowledge is acquired. Unlike empiricists who believe that knowledge is built from sensory input, rationalists hold that our ability to reason and reflect allows us to discover the truths of existence, even in the absence of sensory data. Descartes, for example, believed that reason alone could lead to certainty about the existence of God and the nature of the universe. He used reason to argue for the existence of a benevolent God who would not deceive us, and from this premise, he built his system of knowledge. Leibniz and Spinoza similarly believed that through the application of reason, humans could understand the underlying unity of the cosmos. For them, reason was the means of accessing the deepest truths of reality, whether about the universe, the human mind, or the divine. In this way, rationalism emphasizes the importance of intellectual intuition and logical deduction as the primary means of acquiring knowledge, over and above empirical observation or sensory experience. Rationalism has often been contrasted with empiricism, the philosophical view that knowledge comes from sensory experience. The key criticism rationalists have of empiricism is that sensory experience is unreliable, subjective, and prone to error. Our senses can deceive us, and the world we perceive may not be an accurate representation of reality. For example, we may see a stick in water that appears bent, but when we take the stick out, we see that it is straight. According to rationalists, if we rely solely on sensory experience, we are bound to encounter illusions and mistakes. Rationalists argue that reason provides a more reliable and certain path to knowledge. Where empiricism relies on what can be perceived and observed, rationalism maintains that certain truths, such as mathematical truths, logical principles, and moral laws, can only be accessed through pure reason, independent of sensory data. Rationalism has had a profound influence on the development of modern philosophy, especially in areas like epistemology, the theory of knowledge, metaphysics, and ethics. In epistemology, rationalism led to the exploration of the limits of human knowledge and the role of reason in understanding the world. Descartes' skepticism about the reliability of the senses laid the groundwork for modern discussions about the nature of knowledge, certainty, and belief. In metaphysics, rationalism's focus on reason as the path to understanding reality influenced the development of systems like idealism, the belief that reality is mentally constructed, and Transcendentalism, the belief that the true nature of reality transcends empirical observation. Rationalism also influenced ethics, particularly in the development of moral philosophy. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant, though critical of some elements of rationalism, built upon its legacy by arguing that moral truths could be known through reason, not experience. Despite its influence, rationalism has faced significant criticisms. One of the main critiques comes from empiricists, who argue that reason alone cannot provide knowledge of the world, as it is abstract and disconnected from lived experience. Empiricists contend that knowledge must be grounded in sensory experience to be meaningful and valid. Another criticism is the issue of innate ideas. While rationalists like Descartes and Locke believed that some knowledge is inherent in the mind, many philosophers questioned how these innate ideas are formed and how they interact with external experiences. Finally, rationalism's emphasis on reason has led some to argue that it neglects the importance of emotional, social, and experiential knowledge, areas that can't always be captured by pure rational thought. Rationalism remains a powerful force in the history of philosophy. By asserting that reason is the foundation of knowledge, rationalists have helped shape the way we understand the world, from mathematics and logic to metaphysics and ethics. They emphasize that some truths are beyond sensory experience and must be uncovered through intellectual insight and reasoning. Although rationalism has faced criticism, particularly from empiricists and those who emphasize experiential knowledge, its legacy continues to shape modern thought. The search for universal truths, the emphasis on reason as a tool for understanding, and the focus on intellectual self-sufficiency are still central ideas in contemporary philosophy. Rationalism reminds us that the human mind is capable of great intellectual feats, and that through reason we can uncover profound truths about ourselves, the world, and the universe. What if the natural state of human beings is one of chaos, violence, and fear? What if civilization itself is built on the necessity of an all-powerful authority to keep us in check? These are the central ideas of Hobbesian philosophy, a vision of human nature and society proposed by Thomas Hobbes, one of the most influential political philosophers of the 17th century. Thomas Hobbes was an English philosopher born in 1588, a time of political instability and civil war. His most famous work, Leviathan, published in 1651, outlines his vision of human nature, society, and government. Hobbes is often associated with political absolutism, the belief that a strong, centralized authority is necessary to maintain order and prevent societal collapse. Hobbes's philosophy is grounded in his bleak view of human nature. He believed that without a powerful governing force, people would descend into a state of anarchy and violence. This perspective was shaped by his experiences in England, witnessing the chaos of the English Civil War and the breakdown of social order. At the heart of Hobbesian philosophy is the concept of the state of nature, a hypothetical condition in which humans live without any organized government or authority. Hobbes famously described this state as a time of constant conflict, where individuals are driven by self-interest and fear of others. In Hobbes's view, in the state of nature, there is no morality, no justice, and no rights. Instead, individuals are in a constant struggle for survival, as they compete for resources, security, and power. Without a higher authority to enforce rules, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Hobbes believed that humans are naturally selfish, driven by their desires and fears. In the absence of a social contract, individuals would constantly be in a state of war with one another, each person trying to secure their own well-being at the expense of others. This view is often summarized by Hobbes' famous phrase, "the war of all against all." To escape the chaos of the state of nature, Hobbes argued that individuals must come together and form a social contract. The social contract is an agreement among individuals to create a governing body that has the power to enforce laws, maintain order, and protect the common good. Hobbes believed that in exchange for security and protection, individuals must surrender some of their natural freedoms and submit to the authority of a ruler or government. This ruler, in Hobbes's view, must have absolute power to ensure peace and prevent society from descending back into anarchy. He referred to this ruler as the Leviathan, symbolizing a powerful, all-encompassing authority. The social contract for Hobbes was not an agreement between citizens and the government in the way we think of democracy today. Rather, it was an agreement to allow a single ruler or government to wield absolute power over all aspects of life in exchange for the protection of basic security and order. In Hobbes's vision of the ideal government, the Leviathan represents an absolute sovereign, an authority with unquestioned power to make laws, enforce them, and ensure peace. This sovereign could be a monarch, an assembly, or any other form of centralized authority, but it must possess absolute power to effectively control society and prevent the breakdown of order. Hobbes argued that the sovereign must be irrevocably in charge, with the power to make decisions without being challenged by the people. The people in turn are bound to obey the sovereign's laws, as the sovereign's role is to protect them from the dangers of the state of nature. While Hobbes acknowledges that the people might not always agree with the sovereign, he argues that peace and stability are far more important than individual freedoms or democratic participation. The sovereign's power, Hobbes maintains, is justified by the need to maintain order and protect citizens from the violence and insecurity of the natural state. Central to Hobbesian philosophy is his view of human nature. Hobbes believed that humans are fundamentally motivated by self-preservation. In the state of nature, individuals act in their own self-interest, seeking to protect themselves and secure their resources. In Hobbes' words, humans are driven by fear, self-love, and desire for power. Without a governing force, these instincts can lead to conflict and violence, as people pursue their own survival at the expense of others. The social contract, therefore, is not just a moral agreement, it is a pragmatic necessity. By surrendering their individual freedoms to a powerful sovereign, individuals can ensure their survival and avoid the constant fear and uncertainty of the state of nature. Hobbes's view of human nature is often seen as pessimistic. He believed that humans, by nature, are not inclined toward cooperation or altruism, but are instead focused on their own interests and security. This is why Hobbes argues that an absolute authority is needed to impose order and prevent violence. Hobbes's ideas have had a profound impact on the development of political philosophy, particularly in the areas of social contract theory and political absolutism. His argument that individuals must submit to a powerful authority to maintain peace has influenced the development of modern political systems, including both absolute monarchies and democratic governments. In contrast to more optimistic views of human nature, such as those proposed by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who believed that humans are naturally good but corrupted by society, Hobbes's vision of human nature is far more cynical. He believed that without a strong government, people would inevitably fall into violence and chaos. Despite his emphasis on absolute authority, Hobbes also contributed to ideas of sovereignty and the legitimacy of government, which continue to shape modern debates about the role of the state and the rights of individuals. Hobbes's philosophy has faced significant criticisms over the centuries, particularly regarding his views on human nature and the role of the sovereign. Hobbes' belief that humans are naturally selfish and prone to violence has been challenged by other philosophers, like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that humans are naturally cooperative and that social institutions should be designed to protect individual freedoms rather than impose absolute control. Hobbes' idea of an all-powerful sovereign has also been criticized as too authoritarian. Critics argue that his political theory justifies tyranny and suppresses individual freedoms. In modern democratic thought, the idea of a government with unchecked power is seen as dangerous and incompatible with the principles of liberty and democracy. Hobbes argued that the sovereign's power is legitimate simply because it provides security and prevents chaos. However, many philosophers have questioned whether the mere provision of security is enough to justify absolute power. Ideas of popular sovereignty and the rule of law have become central to modern political philosophy, emphasizing that authority must be derived from the consent of the governed. Hobbesian philosophy presents a stark and powerful vision of human nature and society. His view that humans are naturally driven by self-interest and fear, and that only an absolute sovereign can ensure peace, has shaped much of modern political thought. While his emphasis on a strong, centralized authority may seem extreme to modern sensibilities, Hobbes's ideas about the nature of the state, the role of government, and the necessity of social order continue to provoke thought and debate today. Hobbes challenges us to think about the balance between freedom and security, and to consider what happens when society breaks down and the natural state of humanity emerges. What if our minds were like blank slates, and all of our knowledge came from experience? What if government was not about absolute power, but about the protection of individual rights? These ideas form the foundation of Lockean philosophy, developed by John Locke, one of the most influential thinkers of the Enlightenment. Locke's theories on human nature, knowledge, and the role of government help shape modern political thought and continue to influence our understanding of rights, democracy, and the self. In today's exploration, we'll dive into Locke's key ideas and how they've impacted philosophy, politics, and society. John Locke was an English philosopher born in 1632, a time of political upheaval and shifting social norms. Locke's work became central to the development of modern liberalism, especially in the realms of epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and political philosophy. His most famous works, an essay concerning human understanding and two treatises of government, laid the groundwork for many modern ideas about personal liberty, government, and the rights of individuals. Locke was deeply influenced by the tumultuous political climate of his time, which saw the English Civil War, the execution of King Charles I, and the establishment of the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell. These events helped shape Locke's thinking about the nature of government and the relationship between the individual and the state. At the heart of Locke's philosophy is his theory of knowledge, which is built on the idea of the mind as a tabula rasa, a blank slate. Locke argued that when we are born, our minds are like empty canvases, free of any preconceived ideas or knowledge. It is only through our sensory experiences and interactions with the world that we begin to acquire knowledge. This theory places Locke in the camp of empiricism, a school of thought that asserts that knowledge is primarily derived from sensory experience. According to Locke, all of our ideas come from two sources: sensation, our experiences with the world through our five senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. These experiences provide us with basic information about the world around us. Reflection, the mind's internal processing of sensory data, where we reflect on our experiences and form abstract ideas based on them. Locke believed that through these two processes, we gain knowledge about the world, and that our understanding of reality is built from our direct experiences and the way we reflect on them. This view challenges earlier notions that knowledge is innate, or can be known through pure reason alone. Locke's political philosophy is rooted in his view of human nature. Unlike Hobbes, who saw humans as naturally driven by self-interest and prone to violence, Locke believed that in the state of nature, humans are generally peaceful and cooperative. Locke's state of nature is not a place of constant conflict, but a condition in which individuals are free and equal, without a formal government. In Locke's view, the state of nature is governed by natural law, which is a moral order that humans can discover through reason. The key natural rights in Locke's framework are life. Every person has the right to live and to protect their own life. Liberty. Every person has the right to freedom, to make their own choices, and to pursue their own happiness. Property. Every person has the right to own property and to use their labor to transform the world around them. For Locke, these natural rights are inalienable. They cannot be taken away by any government or authority. The protection of these rights is the primary function of government, and Locke argued that any government that violates these rights is unjust and illegitimate. Locke's ideas about the state of nature and natural rights led to his influential theory of the social contract. Unlike Hobbes, who believed that individuals must submit to an absolute sovereign for the sake of peace and security, Locke argued that government should be based on the consent of the governed. In other words, individuals agree to form a government in order to protect their natural rights, but they only do so willingly. According to Locke, individuals come together and form a government by consenting to a social contract. This contract does not involve surrendering all their rights, as Hobbes believed, but rather forming a government that acts as a neutral party to protect their rights. The government's power is limited by the natural rights of the individuals it governs. For Locke, the social contract is a two-way relationship. The people agree to obey the laws and support the government, and in return the government is obligated to protect their natural rights. If a government fails to uphold its end of the contract, or if it infringes upon the natural rights of its citizens, the people have the right to revolt and establish a new government. Locke's political philosophy has had a profound influence on the development of modern political thought, particularly the ideas of liberalism, democracy, and individual rights. Locke's emphasis on the separation of powers and the importance of limited government can be seen in the foundations of modern democratic systems, including the US Constitution. Locke's concept of popular sovereignty, the idea that legitimate government derives its power from the consent of the governed, became a cornerstone of modern democratic theory. In addition, Locke's views on property rights and economic freedom have influenced capitalist thought and the development of modern market economies. He argued that individuals have the right to own and dispose of property as they see fit, and that this right is essential to human liberty and prosperity. Locke's philosophy also influenced human rights movements, particularly with regard to individual liberties and the protection of personal freedoms from government interference. While Locke's philosophy has been immensely influential, it has also faced criticism, particularly in relation to his views on property and the role of government. Critics argue that Locke's theory of property, which suggests that private ownership is a natural right, has been used to justify inequality and the exploitation of resources. Some philosophers argue that Locke's ideas on property favor the wealthy and fail to account for the social and economic structures that create inequality. Additionally, Locke's vision of the state of nature and his ideas about government assume a degree of individual autonomy and equality that may not exist in practice, particularly in societies marked by inequality or injustice. Nevertheless, Locke's ideas continue to resonate today. His focus on individual rights, the role of government in protecting those rights, and the concept of popular sovereignty remain central to contemporary political thought. Locke's influence can be seen in liberal democracies around the world, where the protection of personal freedoms, human rights, and the rule of law are fundamental values. Lockean philosophy offers a vision of humanity that emphasizes reason, equality, and the protection of individual rights. By focusing on the importance of experience as the foundation of knowledge, Locke challenged earlier notions of innate ideas and reason alone as the source of truth. His views on human nature, government, and natural rights have shaped the modern world, influencing everything from democracy to human rights to economics. Locke reminds us that government's true purpose is to protect the rights and freedoms of individuals, and that a just government is one that derives its power from the consent of the governed. His ideas continue to inspire those who seek to create a society based on freedom, equality, and the rule of law. Romanticism was a movement that spanned various fields, including literature, music, art, and philosophy. It arose as a reaction against the Enlightenment ideals of reason, order, and scientific rationality. Whereas the Enlightenment emphasized logic, progress, and universal truths, Romanticism celebrated emotion, imagination, and individuality. Romantic thinkers and artists sought to explore the depths of human experience, often looking to nature and the emotions as sources of inspiration. Romanticism valued the individual and the subjective experience, encouraging people to look inward and express their unique perspectives on the world. It also emphasized the sublime, those overwhelming, awe-inspiring moments when one encounters something vast, mysterious, or beautiful in nature. At its core, Romanticism was about embracing feelings and experiences that could not be fully explained or captured by reason alone. Love, fear, wonder, and despair were seen as essential to the human condition. Romanticism emerged in response to the intellectual climate of the Enlightenment, which prized reason, logic, and empirical knowledge. Enlightenment thinkers like Descartes and Newton sought to explain the world through scientific observation, universal principles, and objective facts. They believed that human progress could be achieved through reason alone. In contrast, Romanticism placed a premium on emotion, intuition, and the individual's inner experience. Romantic thinkers believed that the intellectual focus on reason had neglected the emotional, spiritual, and imaginative aspects of life. For them, human beings were not just rational creatures, they were also emotional, creative, and deeply connected to the mysteries of existence. Romanticism, therefore, emphasized the importance of feeling over logic, instinct over calculation, and passion over detachment. In a world dominated by science and reason, Romantic thinkers sought to remind humanity of the power and significance of the emotional and the irrational. Nature plays a central role in Romantic thought. Romantic thinkers and artists often sought inspiration from the natural world, seeing it as a reflection of deeper truths and emotions. For them, nature was not just a backdrop for human activity, it was a source of sublime beauty and a means of connecting with the divine or transcendent. The sublime, a key concept in Romanticism, is that feeling of awe and wonder one experiences when encountering something vast and overpowering in nature, like a towering mountain, a wild storm, or the vastness of the ocean. The sublime is not just beauty, it's an emotion that evokes a sense of both awe and fear, a recognition of the limits of human understanding. Romantics often felt that the natural world provided a refuge from the artificiality of industrialized society. They believed that nature had the power to inspire and elevate the human soul, offering a path to spiritual and emotional renewal. The Romantic poets, artists, and philosophers celebrated the unspoiled, untamed aspects of nature, seeing it as a symbol of freedom, individuality, and emotional depth. One of the defining features of Romanticism is its emphasis on individualism. Romantic thinkers valued the unique, subjective experiences of each person and rejected the idea of a one-size-fits-all approach to life. They believed that true creativity and authenticity could only come from embracing one's inner self and expressing it freely, without the constraints of societal norms or expectations. The Romantic emphasis on individualism led to a celebration of personal freedom, creativity, and expression. Whether in literature, music, or visual arts, Romantic artists sought to break free from traditional forms and explore new ways of communicating the complexity of the human experience. Romanticism also placed a strong emphasis on the imagination. For Romantic thinkers, imagination was not just a tool for creating art, it was a gateway to deeper understanding and insight. Imagination allowed individuals to transcend the limitations of the physical world and connect with more profound metaphysical truths. Romanticism had a profound influence on many thinkers, poets, and artists. Some of the most notable figures in Romantic philosophy include Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whose work laid the groundwork for Romantic thought, especially with his ideas on natural human goodness and the corrupting influence of society. In his work, The Social Contract, Rousseau argued that civilization and social institutions had corrupted the natural innocence of human beings. In his earlier work, Confessions, he explored the inner workings of the self, celebrating individual authenticity and emotional expression. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a German writer and philosopher, is considered one of the most significant figures in Romanticism. His works, including Faust and the Sorrows of Young Werther, explore themes of personal desire, emotional depth, and the individual's quest for meaning in a complex world. Friedrich Schiller was a German philosopher and poet whose works emphasized the importance of beauty, imagination, and human freedom. He believed that art and beauty were ways to connect the individual to the divine and to find meaning in life. William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge were central figures in English Romanticism. Wordsworth's poetry often explored the beauty and power of nature, while Coleridge delved into the mystical and emotional depths of the human soul. Their work helped define the Romantic emphasis on individual experience and the sublime power of nature. As the author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley was also a major figure in the Romantic movement. Her work reflects the Romantic fascination with the limits of human knowledge, the consequences of unchecked ambition, and the exploration of the darker sides of the human psyche. Romanticism had a lasting impact on the development of modern art, literature, and philosophy. It challenged the rationalism of the Enlightenment and emphasized the importance of individual expression, emotion, and the imagination. The Romantic movement inspired new artistic and literary forms that sought to express the complexity of human experience. Today, Romanticism continues to influence contemporary art and philosophy. Its emphasis on individuality and emotion resonates in today's focus on self-expression, personal freedom, and the exploration of the inner self. The romantic view of nature as a source of beauty, inspiration, and transcendence remains a powerful part of how we interact with the natural world. Despite its lasting impact, Romanticism has faced significant criticism. Some critics argue that the emphasis on emotion, intuition, and the sublime can lead to idealization and a detachment from reality. Romantic thinkers and artists often rejected reason and rationality, and some saw this as a retreat from practical, real-world concerns. Additionally, the romantic idealization of nature as pure and untainted has been critiqued for ignoring the ways in which nature itself can be harsh, dangerous, and indifferent to human desires. Critics also argue that the focus on individualism can sometimes lead to excessive subjectivity and a disregard for the collective good. What if history is not just a series of random events, but the story of class struggle? What if the root of inequality and social injustice lies in the way society organizes its economy and distributes power? This is the essence of Marxism, a revolutionary social, political, and economic theory developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the 19th century. Marxism offers a critique of capitalism, focusing on the way economic systems shape human society, relationships, and power dynamics. At its core, Marxism sees the struggle between the working class, the proletariat, and the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, as the engine of historical change. In today's exploration, we'll dive into Marxist theory, its view of history, its critique of capitalism, and its vision for a future society built on equality and collective ownership. Karl Marx was a German philosopher, economist, and revolutionary socialist born in 1818. Marx's most famous works, including the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, laid the foundation for Marxist thought, which critiques capitalism and offers a vision of a classless society. Marx's ideas were shaped by his desire to understand the nature of social inequality and to find a solution to the exploitation he saw in industrial society. Working alongside Friedrich Engels, Marx argued that the economic structure of society is the foundation upon which all other aspects of society, political, legal, and cultural, are built. Marx's historical materialism, his theory of class struggle, and his critique of capitalism have made him one of the most influential figures in modern political thought. His ideas have inspired movements for social change, revolutions, and socialist governments around the world. At the heart of Marxism is the theory of historical materialism, which posits that the development of human society is shaped primarily by material, economic conditions, rather than ideas, morals, or individual actions. Marx argued that the economic base, the way society produces and organizes material goods, determines the superstructure, which includes politics, law, culture, and ideology. Marx believed that all societies throughout history are structured around the way they produce goods and services. In every society, a dominant class controls the means of production, whether it's land, factories, or technology, and exploits the labor of the working class. These economic relations, Marx argued, are the driving force of social change. For example, in feudal societies, the ruling class, the nobility, controlled land and resources, while the peasants worked the land. In capitalist societies, the bourgeoisie, capitalist class, owns the means of production, while the proletariat, working class, sells their labor in exchange for wages. According to Marx, history progresses through changes in the economic base, driven by contradictions within the existing economic system. One of the central ideas of Marxism is the concept of class struggle. Marx believed that society is divided into two main classes: the bourgeoisie, who own the means of production, and the proletariat, who sell their labor to survive. The relationship between these two classes is inherently exploitative, as the bourgeoisie profits from the labor of the proletariat while paying them less than the value of what they produce. Marx argued that the history of all societies is the history of class struggles. These struggles arise from the economic conditions that shape society, where one class seeks to maintain or increase its wealth and power, while the other class fights for better wages, working conditions, and social equality. For Marx, capitalism is the latest stage in this historical development. Under capitalism, the bourgeoisie controls the means of production, factories, land, etc., while the proletariat provides the labor. Marx believed that this system is inherently exploitative, as the value produced by the worker is greater than the wages they receive. This surplus value is extracted by the capitalists, leading to wealth inequality and social injustice. In his famous work, Das Kapital, Marx analyzed capitalism in depth. He argued that capitalism is built on the exploitation of workers, and that this exploitation is hidden behind the idea of free markets and exchange. The working class is paid wages that do not reflect the full value of the goods or services they produce. The difference, known as surplus value, is pocketed by the bourgeoisie as profit. Marx also argued that capitalism leads to alienation, the feeling of disconnection and powerlessness that workers experience in a capitalist system. Workers are alienated in several ways. Workers have no control over the goods they produce, which are owned and sold by the capitalists. Workers perform repetitive tasks in factory settings, with little connection to the end product or its creation. Capitalism encourages competition and individualism, leading to a breakdown of social bonds and community. According to Marx, this alienation and exploitation are inherent in the capitalist system, and they cannot be resolved within the system itself. Only through revolution and the overthrow of capitalism can the workers achieve freedom and equality. Marx's ultimate goal was the establishment of a classless society, communism. Marx envisioned a world where the means of production were collectively owned and the exploitation of labor was abolished. In this society, the state would eventually wither away as class distinctions and economic inequality disappeared. In a communist society, the working class would control the means of production, and goods would be distributed based on need rather than profit. There would be no private ownership of land, factories, or other resources, and the state would serve the interests of the people rather than the capitalists. Marx believed that the proletarian revolution would lead to the dictatorship of the proletariat, a transitional phase in which the working class would seize political power, dismantle the capitalist state, and restructure society along socialist lines. Eventually, the state itself would become unnecessary, and society would operate on the basis of shared resources and collective decision-making. Marxism has had a profound influence on political thought and revolutionary movements around the world. Marx's ideas about class struggle, the exploitation of workers, and the need for a revolutionary overthrow of capitalism inspired numerous socialist and communist movements, most notably the Russian Revolution of 1917. Lenin, Stalin, and other Soviet leaders were deeply influenced by Marx's ideas, though their interpretations and implementations of Marxism, known as Marxism-Leninism, led to authoritarian regimes that often diverged from Marx's original vision of a classless, stateless society. Marxism has also influenced anti-colonial movements, labor movements, and socialist governments around the world. Marxist thought has played a central role in shaping the politics of many countries in the 20th century, from Cuba to China to Vietnam. While the implementation of Marxism has been controversial, and many Marxist-inspired regimes have faced significant criticism for authoritarianism and economic inefficiency, Marxism remains an important intellectual framework for understanding inequality, exploitation, and the dynamics of power in society. While Marxism has been influential, it has faced significant criticism. Critics argue that Marx's theory of historical materialism, which suggests that economic conditions are the primary drivers of historical change, overly simplifies the complexities of human society. Social, political, and cultural factors also play a significant role in shaping history. Many Marxist-inspired regimes, such as the Soviet Union, have been criticized for their authoritarian nature and failure to achieve the egalitarian, classless society Marx envisioned. These regimes often became more centralized and repressive, contradicting Marx's idea of a stateless communist society. Critics question the feasibility of Marx's vision of a stateless, classless society. Many argue that human nature, with its desire for power and self-interest, makes such a society difficult to achieve in practice. Marxism provides a powerful critique of capitalism and a vision for a more just, equal, and collective society. Its focus on class struggle, exploitation, and the role of material conditions in shaping history has had a profound impact on political thought and revolutionary movements worldwide. While the implementation of Marxist theory has been complex and often controversial. Its emphasis on economic inequality and the potential for social change continues to resonate in contemporary political discourse. Marxism challenges us to think critically about the structure of society, the distribution of wealth, and the role of power in shaping our lives. It encourages us to envision a world in which human beings are not exploited for profit, but are free to live in a society based on equality, cooperation, and the collective good. What if morality is not universal, but a creation of society designed to suppress our true potential? What if the pursuit of truth, power, and personal greatness were more important than conforming to conventional values? These are the radical ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher whose work has had a profound and enduring impact on modern thought. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges traditional ideas about morality, religion, and human nature, calling for a revaluation of values and the embrace of personal power and individual greatness. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher, poet, and cultural critic born in 1844. His work challenged the foundations of Christianity, traditional morality, and the Enlightenment ideals of reason and progress. Nietzsche's most famous works, including Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and The Genealogy of Morals, introduced groundbreaking ideas about power, culture, and the self. Nietzsche's philosophy often focused on the individual's relationship with society and the forces that shape human behavior, rejecting conventional norms in favor of self-expression, creativity, and personal greatness. His writings are filled with provocative ideas, including the concept of the Übermensch, Overman or Superman, the will to power, and the notion of eternal recurrence. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is the concept of the will to power. Nietzsche believed that the fundamental driving force in human beings is not a quest for happiness, morality, or truth, but a will to power, the instinctual desire to assert and enhance one's strength, influence, and creative potential. The will to power goes beyond mere survival or the pursuit of material gain. It is the force that drives individuals to overcome obstacles, to transcend limitations, and to express their unique creativity and vitality. Nietzsche saw this drive as inherent in all living beings, not just humans, and believed that it was the force behind all action, growth, and change. For Nietzsche, the will to power is the key to understanding human nature and behavior. It is not only the will to control others, but also the will to master oneself, to embrace challenge, and to shape one's own destiny. The more a person is able to fully express their will to power, the more they can experience personal greatness and meaning. Closely related to the will to power is the concept of the Übermensch, often translated as Overman or Superman. In Nietzsche's vision, the Übermensch represents an ideal type of human being who transcends conventional morality, societal norms, and self-imposed limitations to live an authentic, creative, and powerful life. The Übermensch is a figure who is self-creating, who defines their own values and meaning in life, rather than relying on traditional systems of belief or imposed authority. The Übermensch does not follow the rules of society or religion. Instead, they create their own path, guided by the will to power and the pursuit of personal greatness. Nietzsche introduced the idea of the Übermensch in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, where the prophet Zarathustra declares that humanity's ultimate goal should be to strive toward the Übermensch as a model of human evolution. The Übermensch is the next step in human development, surpassing the limitations of existing moral codes and embracing the freedom to create new values and goals. One of Nietzsche's most revolutionary ideas is his call for a revaluation of values. Nietzsche believed that traditional Western morality, influenced heavily by Christianity, was based on values that stifled human potential. Concepts like humility, self-sacrifice, guilt, and obedience were, in Nietzsche's view, tools used by the weak to control the strong. Nietzsche argued that traditional morality was a product of the slave morality, a moral code developed by the oppressed classes to subvert the natural dominance of the strong. Slave morality values qualities like meekness, compassion, and self-denial, while master morality, in contrast, values power, pride, and the assertion of strength. Nietzsche's call for a revaluation of values was a challenge to these long-standing moral systems. He urged individuals to reject the moral codes imposed by religion and society, and to instead embrace a new set of values based on strength, self-assertion, and the pursuit of individual greatness. This revaluation would allow individuals to live more fully and authentically, free from the constraints of traditional morality. One of Nietzsche's most famous and provocative statements is that God is dead. This idea, which appears in works like The Gay Science and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, symbolizes the decline of traditional religious belief in modern society, particularly the belief in the Christian God as the ultimate moral authority. Nietzsche did not mean this literally, but rather as a statement about the loss of religious faith and the collapse of traditional religious and metaphysical systems in the modern world. With the death of God, Nietzsche argued, humanity must confront the consequences of a world without absolute meaning or purpose. This creates both a crisis and an opportunity for individuals to create their own values and meaning. Without a transcendent source of moral authority, Nietzsche believed that people were free to embrace their will to power, to assert their individuality, and to create new forms of meaning in a world that no longer relied on religion or traditional morality. Another key concept in Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of eternal recurrence. This is the notion that all events in life will repeat themselves infinitely, with every choice and action recurs eternally in the same way. Nietzsche posed the question, if you had to live your life over and over again, exactly as it is now, would you be able to embrace it? Eternal recurrence is a test of living authentically and fully. Nietzsche believed that only by embracing the idea of eternal recurrence could one truly live a life of meaning and power. If you can face the possibility of repeating your life forever without regret, then you are truly living in accordance with the will to power and the pursuit of your own greatness. The concept of eternal recurrence challenges individuals to live deliberately, to embrace their existence, and to make choices that affirm life, rather than retreat from it or seek meaning in external authorities. Nietzsche's ideas have had a profound and far-reaching influence on philosophy, literature, psychology, and political theory. His critique of morality, religion, and traditional values helped pave the way for existentialism, postmodernism, and the development of psychoanalysis. Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Heidegger were influenced by Nietzsche's emphasis on individual freedom, authenticity, and the rejection of traditional values. Nietzsche's ideas about the will to power and the Übermensch also played a central role in the development of Nietzschean feminism, which reinterprets Nietzsche's ideas to empower women to embrace their own strength and independence. In politics, Nietzsche's ideas about individualism, power, and the rejection of conventional morality have influenced a wide range of thinkers, from anarchists to libertarians to those who critique the conformist tendencies in modern societies. Nietzsche's philosophy has faced significant criticism over the years. Some critics argue that his emphasis on individualism and the will to power can lead to elitism, selfishness, or even authoritarianism. Nietzsche's ideal of the Übermensch, often misunderstood, has been misappropriated by some political movements, most notoriously the Nazis, despite Nietzsche's own vehement opposition to anti-Semitism and nationalism. Additionally, Nietzsche's critique of traditional morality has been criticized for undermining the foundation of ethical behavior and social cohesion. Without a moral framework grounded in religion or universal principles, critics argue, society may fall into nihilism or moral relativism. Finally, Nietzsche's concept of eternal recurrence can be seen as an existential burden, a reminder that life's meaning must come from within, which can be a daunting responsibility for some. Nietzschean philosophy invites us to challenge conventional ideas about morality, truth, and the nature of existence. Through his ideas of the will to power, the Übermensch, and the revaluation of values, Nietzsche calls on individuals to embrace their inner strength, create their own values, and live authentically, free from the constraints of societal norms and traditional morality. While his philosophy is radical and provocative, Nietzsche's call for self-overcoming, individual greatness, and the affirmation of life continues to inspire contemporary thought and culture. In Transcendentalism, intuition is viewed as a crucial source of knowledge. Transcendentalists believed that the mind could perceive truths that went beyond logical reasoning or empirical observation. By trusting one's inner voice and intuition, individuals could gain insight into the deeper realities of existence. Emerson argued that true knowledge comes from within, through spiritual insight and personal experience, rather than from external authorities such as books, institutions, or religious dogma. He believed that people must listen to their hearts and trust their instincts to find their unique purpose in life. For Transcendentalists, intuition is closely linked to the divine, as it allows individuals to connect with something higher than the physical world. In this sense, spiritual experiences and moments of clarity are viewed as opportunities to transcend the ordinary and to touch upon the eternal truths that govern existence. While Transcendentalism is often associated with personal growth and spirituality, it also has a strong social dimension. Transcendentalists believed that by fostering individual self-reliance and spiritual insight, people could become more compassionate, ethical, and active in creating a just society. Thoreau's essay Civil Disobedience is a prime example of how transcendentalist values were applied to social issues. Thoreau argued that individuals should resist unjust government policies and laws through nonviolent means, as a way of affirming their personal conscience and standing against the moral wrongs of society. His famous act of civil disobedience, refusing to pay taxes in protest of slavery and the Mexican-American War, became a powerful symbol of individual moral action in the face of social injustice. Transcendentalism's emphasis on individual rights and personal freedom also made it an important influence on the abolitionist movement, as well as on later civil rights struggles. While Transcendentalism has been highly influential, it has also faced criticism. Some critics argue that its emphasis on individualism can lead to self-centeredness or a lack of social responsibility. Critics also argue that the idealization of nature can sometimes be overly simplistic, as it may ignore the complexities and challenges of the real world, such as the social and political injustices that people face. Additionally, the abstract spiritual focus of Transcendentalism has been criticized for being disconnected from practical concerns in everyday life. Some have argued that its call for self-exploration and personal growth, while valuable, may be difficult to apply in the context of real-world problems and social inequalities. Transcendentalism offers a profound and inspiring vision of human potential and spiritual growth. By emphasizing individualism, self-reliance, and the power of nature, it encourages individuals to seek personal truth, connect with the divine, and embrace their unique creative potential. The movement's emphasis on intuition and spirituality calls us to look beyond the material world and the conventional values of society, and to discover a deeper, more authentic path in life. While Transcendentalism has faced its share of criticism, its core principles continue to resonate today in movements for environmentalism, social justice, and personal empowerment. It challenges us to trust ourselves, to connect with the natural world, and to live in a way that reflects our highest values and deepest truths.